Before choosing anything, stop for a moment, because what you are about to do is not a game, not a common test, and certainly not empty entertainment. In a few seconds, you will face 4 doors, numbered 1 through 4, and your mind is already working without you realizing it, creating justifications, memories, sensations, and even small impulses that seem random, but are not. Behavioral psychology shows that when faced with simple choices, we reveal deep patterns about how we deal with loneliness, attachment, rejection, control, and social belonging. It's not about getting it right or wrong, because nobody loses here, but it's about perceiving something that usually goes unnoticed in your daily life, the dominant feeling that guides your silent decisions. Maybe you think you choose logically, maybe you believe it's emotional, maybe you say you don't let yourself be influenced, but the truth is that your choice will expose an internal mechanism that operates when you relate, when you distance yourself, when you create habits, and when you try to protect yourself from the world. Watch until the end, because many people choose a door, thinking they understand the reason, and only later realize that they were running away from something or trying to compensate for an old emotional absence. Don't overthink it. Don't try to seem smart. Don't choose what sounds best. Just observe the doors when they appear, because the door you choose will say much more about you than you imagine. Before moving on and showing the doors, let me make a quick, almost imperceptible, but important request for this type of content to continue existing. If at any point in this video you feel that something made sense, that a phrase resonated with you, or that an idea made you reflect on yourself, this simple gesture of leaving a like helps more people have that same moment of awareness. If you feel like it, write in the comments just the number of the door you chose when everything is over, because reading the choices reveals very interesting collective patterns. And if this type of direct, rational, and straightforward psychological analysis resonates with you, subscribing ensures that you don't miss the next content that explores exactly these invisible behaviors of everyday life. Now stay until the end, because complete understanding lies not only in the door you choose, but in the silent reason that led you to it. And this only becomes clear when all the doors are revealed. If you chose door 1, this choice is usually linked to a deep feeling of emotional self-sufficiency, but not in the superficial way that many people imagine. In Carl Jung's psychology, this choice reveals a person who learned early on to depend more on themselves than on others. Not because they never needed support, but because at some point they realized that expecting too much from the world brings frustration. There is a clear pattern of internal control here. You prefer to understand, rationalize, and organize what you feel before showing anything. To others, this may seem like coldness or detachment, but internally there is an intense emotional life, just well protected. Jung would call this a well-constructed persona, created to function socially without exposing vulnerabilities that were once not well received. The psychological teaching of this door is not to change who you are, but to recognize that emotional strength does not mean permanent isolation. Balance begins when you understand that choosing to be alone is different from shutting yourself off for fear of dependence. Door 1 shows maturity, awareness, and emotional discipline, but it also leaves a silent warning. Even the most rational minds need, at some level, to allow true connection so as not to transform protection into an invisible prison. If you chose door 3, the feeling guiding this decision is linked to the tension between change and the fear of losing control, something deeply studied by Carl Jung when he spoke about psychic transformation. This door usually attracts people who feel they are always on the verge of a major turning point in life, but who at the same time carry a silent fear of what might be left behind. There is a very rational internal conflict here. One part of you understands that old habits, relationship patterns, or automatic behaviors no longer work, while another part insists on maintaining them for security. Psychologically, this reveals someone who is conscious, reflective, and attentive to their own contradictions, someone who thinks before acting and who observes their own behavior almost like an analyst of themselves. The teaching of this door is not to force change or remain still, but to understand that fear is not a sign of weakness, but a marker of transition. Dr. 3 teaches that real growth happens when you accept temporary instability as a natural part of psychological maturation, understanding that evolving does not mean losing who you are, but reorganizing who you are becoming. If you chose door 4, the feeling that underpins this decision is linked to the need for meaning and inner coherence, something that Carl Jung's psychology describes as the natural impulse to integrate fragmented parts of one's personality. This door is usually chosen by people who are not content to simply function, produce, or adapt socially, but who need to understand why they do what they do. There is a clear psychological pattern of deep questioning here, of someone who observes their own life as a system that needs to make sense, even when this generates discomfort. In daily behavior, this can manifest as phases of introspection, social withdrawal, or a feeling of existential loneliness, not due to rejection of others, but due to a constant search for inner alignment. Jung saw this movement as a call from the unconscious for individuation, the process of becoming who one is in a more complete way. The teaching of this door is not to accelerate answers or silence doubts, but to accept that not every confusing phase is a mistake. Often, it is a necessary internal adjustment. Dr. 4 reveals depth, awareness, and psychological maturity, but it also reminds us that meaning does not arise from permanent isolation, but rather from the dialogue between who you are inside and the world you choose to inhabit. Regardless of the door you chose, there is a common point that the psychology of human behavior makes clear. We rarely make random decisions. Even when we believe we are choosing on impulse, there is an emotional, social, and psychological history operating in the background, organizing our preferences, our fears, and our protection strategies. The doors only reveal different paths that the mind finds to deal with loneliness, belonging, control, change, and meaning. The central teaching here is not to identify with a label, but to perceive patterns. When you understand your own patterns, you stop reacting automatically and start acting more consciously. This changes how you build habits, how you position yourself in relationships, and how you interpret the behavior of the people around you. The final reflection is simple but profound. The more you observe your choices without judgment, the more psychological freedom you gain. Self-knowledge is not for limiting yourself, it is for expanding possibilities. And every time you understand the reason behind a choice, you stop being just someone who reacts to the world and become someone who actively participates in their own inner development. If you've made it this far, that already says a lot about your level of curiosity and attention to your own mental patterns. So before you leave, make one last simple move. If this content made you reflect at any point, leave a like, because that signals that deeper analyses like this should continue to appear here. If you're not yet subscribed, subscribing now ensures you can follow the next behavioral tests and readings that explore exactly these invisible aspects of the human mind. In the comments, just write the number of the door you chose. Nothing more, because observing these collective choices reveals very interesting psychological trends. And if you want to delve even deeper, watch the video that's appearing in the card now and the complete playlist with all the tests on the channel, where each choice reveals a new angle of human behavior. The more you observe, the more awareness you develop. And this process only begins when you decide to continue exploring.